Known from Street Fighter and loved by a whole new generation through Fortnite, Chun-Li deserves more than just pixels. It's time to bring her into our world. Every project kicks off with firing up the 3D printer. And for this one, Elegoo sent over their ABS-like 3.0 resin, and I've got to say it's been a fantastic material to work with. If you're using an Elegoo printer like I am, they've got a great settings database on their website. It tells you exactly what parameters to use, so I was able to jump straight into printing without doing any calibration tests. You'll find a link to the resin I used along with the print settings sheet in the video description. After warming up the resin to a nice cozy temperature, I hit start, and then it was just a matter of waiting a few hours for the print to finish. And here are all the parts we'll need. The base was super simple, so I also gave my filament printer a chance to feel useful. Of course, every print needs a bit of post-processing to really shine, but I've already shared all my tips and tricks in dedicated videos, so we'll skip that part for now. Here's how the statue looks after cleanup, ready for painting. And we start our way from the bottom to the top. I used a satin black to paint the outer rim of the base. For the top surface, which is meant to resemble wooden parquet flooring, I started by applying the color Middlestone. Since an airbrush allows for a much faster and more even coverage than a regular brush, I used that instead. Next, I use masking tape to define the individual parquet planks and apply the color Mahogany to create some variation in tone. The tape helps to clearly separate the different strips of wood visually. However, the contrast between the colors turned out a bit too harsh, so I softened it by blending in a mix of white, light brown and glaze medium. The real depth came from using oil paint to simulate the wood grain and texture. To finish it off, I applied a wash made from water and mahogany and finally added a touch of black into the gaps between the parquet planks to enhance the separation. With that, the base is complete. Now we can move on to the base accessories. The first piece we're working on here is the punching bag. I wanted to stay fairly close to the sculptor's rendered version, so I went with red as the base color. The statue was sculpted by Stuardo Alvaro. If you're interested in getting this 3D model yourself, you'll find a link to both the model and his Patreon in the video description. Once the entire surface was evenly coated in red, I used a slightly lighter mix to highlight the raised areas. That turned out to be a bit too bright overall, so I toned it down by mixing mahogany, scarlet red and some glaze medium. The color was better at that point, but it still lacked a bit of texture. To fix that, I sponged on some scarlet red mixed with wolf grey to create subtle speckles and visual depth. I then took it one shade darker again, using mahogany and glaze medium, and for the final touch I used oil paint to mix a brighter red that helped bring out all the tiny scratches and indentations in the leather texture. After that, all that was left was painting the hanging mechanism, and the punching bag was done. Next up was the weight plate, which is loosely based on an Elegoo weight plate. Painting that was pretty straightforward. I mixed some mahogany and red for the base color, and then came the slightly tedious part, painting the lettering by hand in white. Since white doesn't cover all that well, I had to go over it several times to get it nice and clean. After that, I just painted the inner ring in silver, and that was it. Last but not least, the kettlebell. I primed it black, gave it a light misting of gunmetal with the airbrush, and then added a few details with a regular brush. And with that, all the base elements were done, so now it's time to move on to Chun-Li herself. We are sticking with the bottom to top approach, so we are starting with her Nike Air Jordans. I began by airbrushing the whole thing yellow and then painted the blue areas by hand. Since part of the sole was supposed to be white, I masked off the yellow and blue sections and sprayed the white with the airbrush. That way you get a super clean edge and nice even coverage. Honestly, I kind of wanted to stop there, but unfortunately only the outer edge of the sole is white. The bottom part had to be blue. So I masked everything again, leaving just a thin strip exposed along the bottom. After that I made some custom decals for the Nike and Air Jordan logos. And finally I painted the shoelaces with a bit of matte varnish so they wouldn't be shiny like the leather. Next up, her leggings. I started with magic blue as the base color. Then I used a mix of electric blue and glaze medium to brighten the spots where light would naturally hit. What took the most time were the 2 yellow stripes running down the sides. To get those crisp, clean edges I used masking tape. Since yellow doesn't cover really well, I first airbrushed a light gray base. The most satisfying part? Definitely peeling off the tape when it's all done. I had already sealed the leggings with the gloss varnish, which is super helpful. It means I can clean up small mistakes or overspray without scratching or damaging the blue paint underneath. Once everything was done, I finished it off with a matte varnish for the final clean look. Now comes the most fun part, painting the skin tone. One of the most important steps for bringing the character to life. I'll be layering different shades to create smooth, natural transitions and a realistic look. It all starts with Warlord Purple as the base coat. On top of that, I airbrushed a mix of dark flash and glaze medium. Next came basic skin tone, again mixed with glaze medium. The glaze medium helps reduce opacity so the transitions stay nice and smooth. I also lower the pressure on the compressor quite a bit. That way the paint comes out in a fine speckled mist, which adds some natural texture to the skin. Here's a quick comparison between the first and second step. After that I went one level brighter using pale flash. And again, here is a comparison with the previous step. Next I applied washes using red, yellow and blue. These washes help bring the skin to life by adding subtle color variation. Red for warmth and blood flow, yellow for undertones and blue to cool down shadow areas and add depth. To add some extra warmth and color to certain areas of the face and body, I used a bit of regular eyeshadow. It works great for softly tinting things like cheeks, lips, and around the eyes. Then it was time to start dialing in the finer details. Using Tamiya enamel blue with some enamel thinner, I painted tiny veins onto the skin. For freckles, I lightly speckled some brown enamel onto the face. And I used the same technique across the rest of the body to add some subtle variation to the skin tone. As a final blending pass, I went back in with pale flash and glaze medium to tie everything together. Before tackling all the small details on the hat, I quickly jumped over to her top. I started with electric blue as the base color. I sealed it with gloss varnish to protect the blue before moving on to the gold parts. Which, yep, meant masking everything. First I primed the gold areas in black. This helps the metallics pop a bit more. Once the golden outlines were done, I had to go through the same masking process again, front and back, to paint the symbols. But it was totally worth it in the end. The edges came out super crisp. Now onto the final stage, the head details. For the hairline I used enamel paint again, since it's easier to get a smooth transition with. When it comes to eye color, I usually go with a neutral gray tone. For the main hair color I mixed charred brown with Prism Effect Copper Fire. That Prism Effect adds a subtle shimmer and depth, making the hair look more natural and dynamic. I also used a Prism Effect paint for the earrings, this time the shade Silver Sun, which, depending on where you look from, shines golden or silver. Next up, the eyes. Of course, I used my eye decals here, and yes, you can find those in my Etsy store. For this figure I used the smallest size from the large sheet. To get the decals to really hug the shape of the eyes, I used Microsol decal softener. I painted the eyebrows using enamel paint, and then added a few hair strands on her head with a slightly lighter brown to give them more texture. At first I tried to paint the hair ties by hand to avoid masking, but as you can see, yellow just doesn't cover well. So I gave in and did it properly with the airbrush. Then I pulled out my makeup palette one more time to softly redden the outer corners of the eyes, which helped blending everything together. After that I painted in some eyelashes. Though honestly I can never decide whether I like the figure better with or without them. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. And finally a tiny drop of UV resin on the eyes for that glossy, glassy look, plus some gloss varnish on the lips, and we're done. If you have any questions about the paints, techniques, or the printing process, feel free to drop them in the comments. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe if you want to see more projects like this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.